Now, let's go on to page 11, where you see your, again, outgoing wiring instruction forms if you have multiple transactions. Then you're going to need the execution of agreements. Now, this is really interesting because in Costa Rica, you're only able to typically execute these agreements in front of a Costa Rican notary, which is also a Costa Rican attorney. So that means one of two things. Either you're going to be in Costa Rica when you sign these documents, or your attorney can fly to you and meet you in the United States and you sign them. The other way to get around that is to sign a power of attorney authorizing your attorney to sign on your behalf. So that's another way to actually close a deal in Costa Rica without physically being present, which happens all the time. Finally, there's close of escrow. So you're going to have escrow agreements and then disbursement instructions. Now, when you fund the escrow money is going to come from your IRA account, including the deposit. This is an area where a lot of people get tripped up because a lot of people at times want to put a deposit down with their own personal cash, but then they want to fund it with their IRA and actually close the deal. You actually can't do that. You must fund each step with your IRA. And that takes us to the closing documentation. So the stock certificates for your Costa Rica LLC, which is a Costa Rica SA, you're going to need to be able to provide that to the custodian in order to close. They're going to require those. We've seen those stock certificates, also known as quota or share agreements in Costa Rica. Those are the required documentation to send to the custodian, and you're going to need to save all that information for the closing transaction file. I can't tell you how many times we've talked to people who have closed these deals and did not do a good job with keeping track of this paperwork, so that when they go to then sell the asset in the future from their IRA, they're missing some very important documentation and they need to be recreated. Now, let's take a look at the three most common pitfalls that we see for IRA investing in Costa Rican real estate. The number one thing that we see happen all the time is commingling of IRA and non-IRA funds. The rules are very clear on this, that you cannot commingle your funds with your IRA funds. And this is something that people inadvertently, unintentionally do on a regular basis. In fact, one client we saw was making a transaction in Costa Rica, and when it came time to close, there was a $6,000 shortfall. The client was proposing to loan personal funds to the IRA escrow to facilitate the IRA closing. He thought since it was such a small amount, it wouldn't be problematic. Fortunately, we were able to stop him from engaging in this prohibited activity, thereby avoiding a potentially catastrophic consequence to his IRA. Another client we had, who was a real estate broker, wished to act as his own escrow agent to save on his escrow fees. This is an example of both a possible taking receipt of IRA funds and not keeping an arm's length transaction distance from the IRA funds. Fortunately, we were able to stop him from engaging in this prohibited activity, saving him a potentially huge loss in his IRA. A final client had two simultaneous transactions happening, and when it came time to close the IRA, his escrow was short. He proposed temporarily loaning the money from the personal escrow to the IRA escrow to be able to close the transaction. Again, that's something that you're not allowed to do, and this client was hoping to do this with all of the best intentions. However, fortunately, we were able to stop him from engaging in this prohibited activity. We were able to fund the IRA, fill the shortfall, and make sure that everything was done in accordance with the law. The second most common pitfall that we see is an arm's length transaction. This is when an IRA holder is not at an arm's length distance from their IRA asset, and this can occur very easily. One example is when an IRA holder purchases Costa Rican real estate through a special purpose entity. Special purpose entity is the Costa Rican SA that is set up for the sole purpose of purchasing this real estate. It's the common desire of the IRA holder to want to be the manager or president of this special purpose entity, as they want to be in control of the entity. However, this is not in keeping an arm's length distance between the IRA holder and the non-disqualified third party as a manager or president of the special purpose entity. So you need to have someone who is not a party in interest be the president of the company. So that means you cannot have your parent, your spouse, your son or daughter as the president of this entity. You need to have a non-interested party. The third most common pitfall that we see is market timing. And this is something where a lot of people, when they're going to make a purchase out of their IRA to buy Costa Rican real estate, and their money before they get started in the process is in mutual funds or in stocks or in some traditional kind of investment, and they want to have the opportunity to maximize on these funds. And so they really want to wait and sell at the very top of the market. Well, there's a huge problem with this, and that is if you need money in the next 30, 60, 90 days, perhaps even less than 6 months, it is not appropriate to have the assets sitting in a volatile kind of investment, for the obvious reason that if the investment goes down, and let's say, for example, if it's in the stock market, if the stock market goes down, you may not have enough money to close, or you may have so much heartache that it's so hard for you to sell at a loss that you won't be able to make the transaction happen. This is something that we see over and over again, so we want to warn and caution people about market timing.